Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your FinTech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shamir Sajdev, and some of FinTech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML podcast. Today we're joined by Chris Franklin, CMO at VibePay. Chris, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. Well, look, let's jump straight into it. For everyone listening, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey so far.
Yeah, relatively fresh-faced to the FinTech space. But yeah, so my early years sort of coming out of education, I actually spent in retail. I got onto the Aldi essentially management scheme, graduate scheme, early 2002, a long time ago now, and worked in store retail management for a long time, around 8 years, I believe it was. But over that time, really got an interest in specifically like Aldi's marketing tactics and their kind of brash, unapologetic approach to being this kind of underdog in this very traditional retail space with all your Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda's. And it really kind of piqued my interest professionally towards the end of that time. I was kind of getting a bit tired of the 16-hour days on the till and stacking the shelves. So actually what I decided to do at that point was take some time out of my career and just one hungover Saturday morning, me and two pals, we booked one-way flights to Australia, essentially sold pretty much all of my possessions, give myself 6 months and went traveling around sort of, say, Asia, the Far East, Japan, Fiji, many places, many stories, but that's a different podcast. But what that did give me a sense of perspective of when I came back to really wanted to do something I was passionate about. And I actually went back to university, self-funded, to do an English literature and creative writing degree, because I wanted to sort of give myself the best ability to communicate well and effectively, knowing I wanted to go into marketing and advertising, but a slightly different spin on it. So I did that at De Montfort University in Leicester, and then that's kind of where my real marketing journey started. I got a pretty low-level role at Centrica, British Gas, the parent company of British Gas. Worked my way through the ranks there for 6 years. Spent a lot of time working for the different companies that Centrica owns, Dynarod, I say British Gas, Hive, so on and so forth. Then moved into sport, British Triathlon, a role what felt like a dream job for me at the time was, working in sport, which was a huge personal passion of mine, and being able to blend advertising, marketing, and sport together was fantastic. But I just had this niggling thing to want to go back into sort of the private sector, and did some work with Luke, the owner of VibePay with British Triathlon. He's a mad endurance athlete. And just we hit it off from the start. He kind of sold me the dream of what VibePay is looking to do. And that's kind of where I am today. Yeah, I'm kind of 5 months in now to my full-time role. I've done some initial consultancy work, but yeah, full-time CMO at VibePay in the FinTech space, learning all things payments and finance.
So for everyone listening who's not aware of VibePay and what they do you want to just give us the sort of brief elevator pitch and tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So VibePay is a pay-by-bank payments platform. So it was born out of the ashes of the COVID crisis, really. Luke, the owner, and the team, their original brief platform was Vibe Tickets. And that stemmed from a really personal story of Luke and a few friends wanting to sell on some Ed Sheeran tickets that he couldn't attend the gig. And obviously using some of the traditional third-party platforms, there's a significant fee which can be leveraged on top of the face value of the ticket. And I think that kind of struck a light bulb moment with Luke of, this doesn't really seem fair that it's just this middle entity, faceless middleman that can just kind of add cash on or take money away from, the two people at either end of the transaction. So VibePay initially was going to be primarily the payment solution just for Vibe Tickets. So to avoid people using PayPal, they could use VibePay to buy tickets using through Vibe tickets. COVID then struck, and there wasn't many gigs for people to attend. So the business strategy quickly pivoted to actually the problem that Luke and the Vibe team were trying to solve was actually bigger than tickets. And it opened itself up to the fintech space of there's a lot of small businesses, SMEs, independent traders, sole traders in the UK, make up the backbone of the UK economy, that they're having to make a choice where they're having to pay transaction fees to take card payments, which in a digital age is becoming more and more prevalent, with no negotiating powers because you just are not big enough to go to a Visa and ask for preferred rates. Or you've got to move to a cashless method where you're asking people to go to a cash point and take cash out and then bring it with them. And the human behavior's changed. I mean, I don't know about you, I literally never carry cash. So anytime someone asks me for cash, I'm in a world of trouble. So what VibePay sets out to do is build a model which doesn't require fees on payments to essentially to generate cash. So payments are free at point of transaction for businesses, for anybody who wants to use it using the pay by bank method. And we'll make our money through other realms, very much on the social media platform models of advertising. We're quite upfront with that. I think we trust our audience and our customers to accept that nothing's free in the world. So if we're not going to charge for one thing, we do have to make revenue elsewhere. So we'll be very transparent we'll use advertising. But what we hope that does is liberate and at least give some cash flow solutions to, like you say, the backbone of the UK economy, which is the small businesses.
The problem is definitely there. I think to a couple of points that, to your point around, not carrying cash. I think on a good day, I might have 20 quid on me if you're lucky. But now, there's been several times I've forgot my wallet and it's just all on Apple Pay on my phone or whatever it is. And I think the point around sort of because we're moving away and moving into a cashless society, the cost of receiving funds for a business, it's noticeable. It might only be sort of 1%, 2%, 3%, but it soon starts to stack up. I mean, we've got global clients. Then on top of those fees, then you're paying sort of foreign exchange fees as well on top of it. So, and all of those things impact, especially smaller businesses that need that cash. And I think the other bit as well is it's the instantaneousness of what VibePay offers. Right, you compare it to say not knocking Go Cardless or whatever, but you take Go Cardless or Stripe. Stripe's holding the cash for a period of time, and Go Cardless takes time to obviously send the cash across. That's 3 to 5 days downtime. If you're holding inventory before you can sort of stock up again.
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You've hit on a really big point. Like in a cost of living crisis, or whether we're coming in or out of that, what is abundantly clear is that small businesses and businesses of all sizes are reliant on cash flow. And when you look at some of the data, one of the big killers of sort of businesses in that first 3-year period is the backing up of invoices that aren't being paid and cleared. And we can't solve all of those problems, but what we can do is offer hopefully a little bit of respite in terms of absolutely, if someone pays you, the word instant should do what it says on the tin, and it should be instant. And that's what we're trying to do, is almost strip things back to people really understand what they're getting. And they're not getting lost in jargon and so on and so forth.
Honing in on that point, I mean, you and I have sort of spoke, on several occasions sort of prior to the recording today, and even by your posts on LinkedIn, I know you're very, very sort of, I think, almost passionate and definitely vocal about cutting through jargon. What's your approach to that? Taking something complex and then making it more simpler for the audience. How do you tend to sort of tackle that?
Marketing sometimes gets nervous between when we say jargon, there's a line between dumbing down something and simplifying something. And sometimes I've been guilty of it many times where you think, I don't want to dumb this down because I don't want to patronize my audience, my customers. But what I say to my team, what was honed into me over many years with people that I've worked with that, I really respected, was marketing should really speak like you would speak down the pub with your pals. That's the best marketing, where, you know, if my friend asks me what VibePay is, I tell them in the most simple, straightest form possible. I don't try and convolute that with AIS data, D2C, B2B, SaaS, all these kind of things, which, you know, are staples in our world. But actually, from a consumer, all they are concerned with is, how can you solve the problem that you've identified I have, and how can I access it? So I think what I try and do, and always want to do it, especially in this space, because I think coming into it, a lot of this stuff was like new to me. You know, I'd seen this kind of these acronyms around, but never, you know, as a passing interest, never really wondered, you know, understood what they were. And especially for a company like VibePay, where it's built on top of open banking and there's payment rails and all sorts, but actually, what is it we're offering the consumer? And we're offering the consumer the ability to pay from one bank account to another. That's it. We don't need to overcomplicate that message. And especially when you're trying to introduce a new way of doing things, which challenges some of the traditional, you know, we're all used to now contactless tap and go. You know, pay by bank and open banking is here to stay. But to get the adoption that is required for it to be successful, people need to get it. And it needs to be understood in the simplest terms possible. So, you know, I'm very challenging to my team to be, how can we essentially make this as simple as possible for people to understand? And I think, you know, we will start using the pay by bank everywhere. So that just, we're trying to reinforce that message. So yeah, it's not about dumbing it down or, you know, like you say, offending people's intelligence. It's just around sort of really making it something that's clear and simple for people to understand, you know, without having to spend 3 weeks reading, you know, a book about what open banking it actually is. So yeah, that's kind of my philosophy, and you know, that can be done in obviously very many ways. But I just feel that it's especially prevalent in the fintech space, because when you're having conversations with people that live and breathe it all the time, we can kind of navel gaze sometimes, and we're used to all the terminology and the language that we all use on our day to day. But actually, the punter at the end of the day just wants to know how their money's going to go from one place to another, and is it safe? So if we can give them that in the simplest, clear terms, great.
All of us in the fintech space, we are guilty of living in a bit of a fintech bubble. When people ask me, you know, what do I do? When I say to them, you know, I run an agency, and I go, oh, you know, we specialize in the fintech sector. A lot of the times they'll turn around, fintech, you know, like, what's that? But it's such a common term for us that we just assume that it's, you know, it's common knowledge, you know, especially in the marketing space. The average person doesn't really know what Google Ads is, let alone fintech, right? So we've got to be mindful of that. But like, listening to you kind of speak about sort of explaining things in the simplest terms and being really clear in, you know, how you would sort of talk to your mate at the pub or whatever it may be, it just sort of makes me think that you know, fundamentally it's about, you know, we talk about, you know, establishing our value proposition as a brand, and you know, but what does that really mean? And it just kind of got me thinking, to sidetrack a little bit. I read a tweet literally, I think it was this morning or yesterday, and they're talking about Dana White from who runs the UFC, and you know, he's had this line of, you know, I sell wow moments, and oh my gosh, oh god moments. He's not selling two blokes fighting in a cage. He's selling a moment that something happens within the ring, and that creates a wow moment. And I think, like, as a brand, you know, that's what you need to be doing. Your value proposition is, you know, really, really sort of finding out that bit that resonates and understanding what you're actually selling to the end user and what do they value the most. I kind of just backtrack a little bit in terms of sort of your previous experience. You know, you were working in sports marketing and you've taken this sort of quite sharp turn into fintech. What do you think the similarities are, you know, to sports marketing, if any? And, you know, what are the unique sort of challenges that you think you've faced, you know, into moving into this industry?
What you hit upon with the Dana White quote, I think, actually lends itself to what I see as the similarities. And the way I operate has been the same whether I've worked in the energy industry, sports industry, and now the fintech, which is I apply an OST rule, so objective, strategy, tactics. Now, the tactics is always the easy thing. It's the what are you actually selling? But for me, and, you know, I'm trying to work with, you know, aspiring marketeers to go, that's the place we always start. And we, when you're thinking about writing your very first advertising campaign or marketing campaign, all you want to do is sell the product because you think that's the right thing to do. And I fell down that trap many, many times. Whereas over, again, working with, real professionals and, and experts in this field who have really honed their craft, what they've done for me is, like you say, you really taught me this OST and start with the objective. And in sport, my objective was written on a board, and it was very much, we want to make people feel better about themselves. That is our objective. So how are we going to do that? That's when you get into strategy. Like, what is the strategy to do that? We wanted them to be fitter and feel fit, feel that sense of achievement. And I was working in triathlon at the time. So what's then the tactics is to, try and get them to sign up to take part in a triathlon. And that was the tactic. So that's what we look to do. And I'm trying to apply the same principles into FinTech. So what is the objective that at VibePay we're trying to do? And that's, at the minute, what I'm working on is to make people feel in control of their finances. They really feel that they understand their finances. How do we do that from a strategic perspective? We're not going to charge for transaction fees. So we're going to give you as much of your money to keep as possible. And then the tactic is come and use VibePay because there's no fees involved. So what are we trying to do? Like you say, give people a bit of financial freedom. That is the objective that my marketing, if executed well, should achieve. And all of the byproducts of that are, increased sales, adoption of the product, social growth, so on and so forth. So that very much is the similarities. The big difference I have encountered, and I guess it would apply itself across all FinTech, is the level of trust that has to be embedded for a consumer to adopt you. What are we asking people to do? Give us their bank details. There isn't much more of a trusting, an act of trust that you can supply than provide an unknown entity your bank details and access to, your bank account, for want of a better phrase. So, building up trust is really important. And I think that's where I'm having to, with sport and wanting to inspire people, you can get them to look invertly into themselves and want to do better for themselves. But obviously in this space, yes, we want to give them more control, but ultimately they have to trust VibePay and brands like VibePay to, manage their personal data as safely as possible. So navigating that is probably the biggest challenge. But again, working with the right kind of agencies and influencers, and the internal staff, hopefully we'll strike that balance right.
I would say on that note, you mentioned obviously influencers and the team there. And what's your tactic or approach to help build trust for VibePay?
I recognise that, again, the social landscape has changed, and I only have to look at my own behaviours on social. When is the last time I shared or commented on the post of a business or brand? I actually can't think, of many times that I do that anymore. What I do is react to people, and that could be people sat behind those brands. Gymshark do this fantastically well. I don't really interact with the Gymshark channel, but what I will do is read when Ben Francis has got something to say or Noel has got something to say. They act as the voices and the credibility for that brand. So what we're looking to do, or what I'm looking to do, is take a similar approach, really, is that, for people to build trust, I think they need to hear it from other people and not just VibePay spending thousands of pounds on advertising, telling everyone how great we are. What we want is credible influencers, people that actually, one of the staples hopefully will be that we want influencers to use the product. And if an influencer doesn't see value in it, that's great. We're not for you, but then you're not the right influencer for us. So we want it to be authentic influencer marketing, where if we can pick particular influencers in the right verticals and the right industries that we believe we can help, if they see the value and they can pass that on to, that advice on to their followers, their communities, fantastic. So That's what we're looking at the minute. We're looking for the right kind of influencers to help us tell our message. We're not just going to go out there and pay, Jane Smith a ridiculous, obscene amount of money just to say how VibePay, how great it is. One is people that, see the product, test it, get the look and feel of it and go, I like this, and I want to see you guys do well. So I'll support you. So yeah, that's kind of the tactic. And I think that's, for me, the way social goes is that people don't want to hear from brands anymore because they want to hear from people. So yeah, we just got to sort of switch to where the land lies.
I think that's kind of where, so just talking about sort of influence marketing sort of specifically, the days of paying an influencer just to sort of do a quick sort of promo is slowly sort of moving away. There's a time and place for it, but I think long-standing relationships with the right influencers are going to be how you move forward and leverage their sort of social proof, and their audience as well at the same time. I do want to go back a step and, just almost sort of building upon sort of that value proposition piece we were talking about, and then also the piece around sort of removing jargon and just going to that into a little bit more detail. It's part of building trust and helping your prospective users onto, your platform and to use your brand. What's your approach on how to educate your customers and how to support them through having to deal with, overwhelming technical terms like, APR or whatever it may be? How are you sort of intending to tackle that with VibePay?
Yeah, and it's probably our biggest challenge because, realistically what we're looking to do is, to a lot of people, it's going to feel like it's a new technology or a new product, but actually it's not. It's basically, like I say, it's just paying from one bank account to another. Actually, what the finance space has done over time is overcomplicated that by adding a layer of card details where you've not just got your bank details, you've got your card details on top of that. So paying by card is somehow different from paying by your bank, which, again, when I come into it and I'm looking at this from a real crass perspective, I think, now I look at that, I think it doesn't really make any sense, but it's probably for another conversation. One of my favorite weapons here is like nostalgia. Like whenever I'm doing anything from a marketing perspective, my go-to is how can I build some nostalgia into it? And that's where I always look for my emotional hooks. And it's a big one in this space because what we will try and do and are trying to do is the fundamental question we get asked all the time is, well, if you're not going to charge for payments, how are you going to make money? That's question 101 I get from users, companies, brands, whomever. That's the question. And what I want to do is use nostalgia in that space to say, well, you used to pay for your text messaging and 11p in your contract and 50p per minute for your phone, for your phone minutes. And, WhatsApp and Messenger came along and said, actually, we can build a model that's different to this. I remember when, hotel Wi-Fi would be 9 or 10 quid on top of your hotel. It wasn't free, and all of a sudden, again, people went, we can do this differently. I remember being quite young and wanting to see what my credit report was, and Experian wanting to charge me $14.99 to start and then $24.99 a month thereafter just to see what my credit number was. And again, there's companies, Credit Karma, so ClearScore, have come along and said, actually, there's different models to this. So when I'm trying to explain to people how you take the cost away from something, I'm trying to tap into these like nostalgia moments of people going, I do remember having to pay that thing. Now I don't. So now I do understand that traditional things that cost money, the cost can be removed. And that's when, we can get into the nitty gritty of, how we're going to do advertising through our channels and so on and so forth. But that's only if people want to know that. But if I could just have people from a credibility and trust perspective, if I could just have them walk away going, okay, yeah, no, actually, I did used to pay for my text messaging. Now WhatsApp does it. And I use WhatsApp an obscene amount of times a day. I trust that it is credible and it is possible to do that. So that's the kind of again, when I talk about stripping it back, rather than try and explain the nitty gritty of how, it costs X amount of money to process a payment and I'm factoring that into my CPA when I'm going back to the CEO and coming up with cost per clicks and acquisitions and all sorts. It's just give them a real life example of where they would have seen that tangible change, and then hopefully they'll just trust the process. So that's kind of how I try and approach it, and how we will continue to try and approach it over the coming months and years.
I like that nostalgic approach. The example I was thinking of was, do you remember when EasyJet first launched, and it was all about sort of budget airlines, and you didn't pay for any, you weren't getting a full meal on the plane or whatever it was, and you had to like pay for you pay for your selector seating and all of these things. And then I think everybody suddenly realised, actually, my God, like we're paying so much more to fly British Airways for all these extra benefits that actually it turns out we can live without, because it's a 3-hour flight and I can get to wherever I want to get to for less than £100. I think it was ridiculously cheap at one point, wasn't it? So yeah, I'm and in the text message bits, definitely resonate. And I think it's getting people out of that mindset. The question I didn't have to ask is, as a smaller challenger brand, how do you create enough noise around what you're trying to do to get enough cut through to, I suppose, begin the movement?
It's the $1 million question. And I think VibePay has been successful in this space previously in the social space. So all of the channels are well followed across X, across Instagram, TikTok. And it has been a very social first brand and business. It's been a lot of giveaways, VibePay Fridays were, viral, and we had all sorts of people wanting to do giveaways. And that does still sit at the heart of what VibePay is and does. Like, we want to be that kind of fun, social first brand. The challenge is that because we're pivoting slightly in terms of our audience, we've sat in the peer-to-peer space for a while. We now want to move, still serve the peer-to-peer audience, but move into the B2B space and serving businesses. Businesses aren't actually that bothered if you're giving away £100 on a Friday for someone to have a nice bank holiday. What they want to know is how easy it is for them to adopt your technology. So this is the challenge of how do we manage those two audiences. We don't alienate our audience and user base, which has got VibePay to a really successful point and a really strong point in its kind of history. But that's not going to drive exponential growth in terms of, where VibePay wants to be 2 years from now. In the UK, we're very fortunate. It's not that difficult to transfer money from one place to another. Some of these new neobanks, Monzo, they've revolutionised the banking space, in the UK. And, we do feel we've got something to add, but that's a challenging environment. But where we can add value is the fact that we can remove transaction fees for businesses. And we know that is a genuinely disruptive product. It's not just a marketing phrase of being disruptive, which we hear 100 times, or I see 1,000 times on LinkedIn now. And disruptive for me now just means you're doing half decent marketing. But actually, disruptive is for, in the product sense, everybody else charges to take payments, we're not going to. That's a truly disruptive action. So the challenge is, how do we get that message out there? And I think, as we've kind of touched upon, it's about working with the right kind of influencers, getting the right kind of PR, being a champion for small business. And I think that's where we need to position ourselves, is that we are here to champion the little guy, the underdog, because that's kind of what we are in this space. Like, we're not the heavy hitter. We're not PayPal. We're not Apple Pay. We are trying to give people a credible and viable alternative. And, hopefully some of our challenges mirror the kind of challenges that businesses themselves are seeing, competing against the likes of Amazon and all sorts these days. So it is going to be a bit of trial and error. And it is going to be very influencer led, and we will make mistakes, and that's okay. As long as we stick to the mission, I think we'll be all right.
Cool. You kind of mentioned that you're doing a bit of a pivot, not a hard pivot, but a pivot away from peer to peer. And I suppose that sort of brings about sort of two questions for me. One is around, how did you decide to obviously make, what was the decision making process behind that? Were you leveraging customer insights? and customer interviews and doing research, etc., proprietary research that led you to that? And then I suppose the second question is, from an innovation perspective and product perspective, how have you adapted your product to then serve that audience?
As I mentioned, the product initially was built peer-to-peer. So, Chris splitting the restaurant bill with friends and family, or, you're on a holiday and you want to easily or seamlessly, move payments. And even in the student space where, you're moving into a student accommodation, you're about to live with 6 people you've never met before. And like I say, when you're trying to work out splitting the bills and stuff, you're transferring bank details. And actually, what VibePay does is give you, your own unique QR code, your own unique VibeMe link. You can share that and make payments or get paid. A lot of businesses, actually came to VibePay and said, we love this idea. Again, it helps solve some of our problems. Obviously, it's free. Payments are free. So if that's going to continue for businesses, and it wasn't the initial idea. And I think there was a point where there was going to be a percentage fee lower than, what's out there on the marketplace, but that was going to be a flat rate. But actually, when I was talking to Luke about coming on board, one of my recommendations was if we can make the model work, just remove the fee, because that then gives you a clear USP in the market. When speaking to businesses that were using the product, what we wanted was the clear and concise feedback from them. What are the pain points in our existing journey, which mean that, it is proving sometimes a bit of a barrier. And issue number one was, I need my customer to have the VibePay app in order to facilitate a payment. So in order to get paid using VibePay, the first thing I have to ask my customer to do is download the VibePay app, create an account. Now, we just know that is going to put off 99.9% of people. And, especially when you've probably got your card in your pocket. So we've been working really hard on solving some of those problems. Guest payment being the main unblocker of the B2B space. I'm really excited to say actually the month of May launches our guest payment. So essentially the only person in the transaction who needs to have a VibePay account is the person needing to get paid. So business, beautician, hairdresser, personal trainer, whomever, they can just send a link or ask a customer to scan their QR code, and that customer can just make the payment without an account. And we believe, and I believe, that to get the kind of mass adoption of the product we need, I need to let people sample it first. I need to let people make a payment or two, see that it's safe and secure. Step 2 then is, hey, why not just have a full account and unlock all these additional benefits that you could have? And it's obviously a very similar approach. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. PayPal took a similar approach when they worked with eBay. My first experience of PayPal was making a payment via PayPal. Creating an account came way further down the line. And now there's all sorts of credit and paying installments and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's what we want to do to build the trust, is use it to make payments. We're not going to store any of your data. You'll make the payment. You'll be doing the right thing because the person on the other end of the payment will keep all of their money. And then it's kind of my team's job over a period of time through brand awareness and marketing and influencer marketing to convince you to create a full account, link your bank details, and see all of the other benefits that VibePay has to offer.
Just talk about one thing that you mentioned, and I think definitely, in my view, good advice, which is if you can move away from a totally disrupt model rather than sort of partly disrupting it, in VibePay's case, removing the fee in its entirety as opposed to a reduced fee, it totally changes the message and the value proposition, right? Because you've gone from being in a position where you're competing on price. And then, I always say, if you're competing on price, the problem is you might just win. And you've completely sort of transitioned that. So you're now no longer competing on price at all. You're in a completely different position because you're presenting a whole new model that is almost totally entirely beneficial to the end user, as opposed to just being slightly less greedy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big There's a big learning in that.
Yeah, and I think, look, we're in a fortunate position as a young startup fintech, that our finance and revenue model isn't built on payment fees. So if it's never been a factor, we don't have to make up that shortfall elsewhere. If one of the traditional platforms wants to match it, their investors and shareholders are going to say, well, that £500 million that we make currently from transaction fees, where are you going to make that elsewhere? And that becomes a difficult conversation. Now, I do believe that we're moving to a space where transaction fees will be removed. I don't think this will just be VibePay. I think this decade will see a shift, because I just believe fundamentally people will start to see it's unfair for people to pay simply to get paid. And I think people just take the moral position that feels wrong, especially if one or two brands can prove that it is possible to make revenue elsewhere and be successful, which is what VibePay wants to do. So I think we're in a race to the bottom anyway. We've just got to get there first. That's where we're at. We need to get there first, and we need to get there well and do it properly. So, touch wood, we're kind of on the right tracks, but yeah, it's a hostile world out
there. So with that, and I suppose my last question before we kind of jump onto the quick fire round, what are the sort of priorities for VibePay for, I suppose, 2024, maybe early 2025?
So the main thing that we talk around a lot is actually educating consumers around pay by bank. So actually take the word VibePay out of it. Is we need to do right by the sector. Open banking is a more general term. So we're going to make a real conscious effort to try and educate the users on pay by bank and why it can be a viable alternative to card payments. Because that's step one. If you don't understand the technology, it doesn't matter what brand you are, you're not going to succeed. So, we want the sector to come together, and collaborate. And there's enough pie out there for us all to be successful and work together to educate people around what open banking can do, the benefits of it, and then pay by bank. So we're going to spend a lot of time in that space. And like I say, try and tackle some of the problems that small businesses, we're not interested at this point in integrating with, an Amazon or an ASOS, because we're not there yet. And B, those guys can afford it. But there's a million other small businesses out there that can't, and are struggling. So our priority will be to double down on those audiences, try and align with them, get the messaging right. And then, like I say, hopefully when people come to make that choice, they want to use VibePay. So that's kind of the priorities for 2024, 25. The CEO might say very differently. He's going to want to see a return on investment. But that's for me to worry about.
Amazing. Chris, that was fantastic. Appreciate your insight and your thoughts. And I think some really good learnings there. Before I let you go, I'll take you through our quick fire round.
Perfect.
What podcasts are you listening to right now?
I'm actually obsessed with one at the minute called Empire, which basically just kind of documents the rise and fall of some of the great empires over time. Because I'm absolutely fascinated with how you can have so much power and control, and then it all just kind of dissipates into nothing. So I'm really interested. So Empire, and if you're interested in history, I can't recommend that one enough.
Other than VibePay, what's your favorite fintech brand or app?
So the one I'm probably most interested in at the minute is Revolut. I'm really interested to see where they're going to position themselves, especially with some of their challenges in the UK and their banking license and so on and so forth. So I'm really interested in them. And there's some other sort of neo Atom, as a direct sort of competitor, quote unquote, sum up, are interesting as well. So it's more just to see what people are doing well, and if there's anything other people are doing well that, we can lean on, then I'm absolutely here for that.
What books are you currently reading or would you recommend to our audience?
Well, I'm actually reading at the minute, it's the New Dad Survival Guide, because I have a 6-month-old young boy in the family. And this, the book was gifted to me. And they said, you might not want to read it at the start, but trust me, you will come to this book at some point. And yes, I'm well into it to work out how to navigate on a few hours sleep and the constant out of the arms for hugs when I'm trying to do Zoom calls and so forth. So yeah, I'm very engrossed in that book at the moment.
Amazing. And then I suppose last but not least, what's one thing that I haven't asked that I perhaps should have?
Well, you didn't actually ask me how VibePay is going to make money, which is actually a relief. You're the first person that hasn't asked me, but I then proceeded to give you the answer anyway. So no, I think you've covered a lot of the things that, I was keen to talk about today. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really useful.
Amazing.
Me as well.
No, amazing. It's been great having you on. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.